How's it going, Twitch? My name is Skull, and on behalf of East Asia Soft, welcome to today's stream. Today, I am continuing my playthrough of Twice Reborn, a vampire visual novel, out now on consoles. So yeah, this is it's a vampire visual novel, one that you can get a game over in. So I gotta be very careful as I play this. Hi, Dim, how are you doing? Let me go ahead and bump that down just a little. There we go. So let's go ahead and load into our save. Yeah, actually. Okay, that's interesting. Loading up the save actually placed me at a point slightly before that. Whatever. Looking forward to the convention tomorrow. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm traveling tomorrow myself. Actually, I'm traveling tonight. I'm going to Denver for a thing. It's kind of a convention. It's more like an exhibition, but anyway. He thought back to the moments he enjoyed speaking with Professor Mickelson about vampires and their place in historical tales. He'd never minded those talks. In fact, he loved them. If vampires were real, Mark thought they'd make the world interesting. He even shared that with the professor. Maybe he should have kept his mouth shut. But those conversations and stories were supposed to be hypothetical. As he was lost in thought, Mark snapped back to the present when he noticed the others were staring at him, waiting for a response. Mark's collar felt snug against his throat, and he pulled at it. After all, vampires are a myth.
You're scaring me. You're kidding, right, Professor? I mean, if you're all vampires, where are your fangs?
He gulped and realized he'd asked a room full of vampires to show him their teeth. Steve Mickelson frowned and looked offended.
If I'd suddenly told you I was a vampire and flashed a fanged smile, you'd run.
Well, that's true, Dim. Well, hopefully you have a good time. He was right. Mark knew that if he'd seen a toothy grin, he would have dashed outside fast as an all-star quarterback. Pushing back his chair, Mark was ready to do just that. He glanced behind him, prepared to sprint in case the society really had invited him over as dinner. He could see the headlines. College student vanishes after dinner party.
We're not the first vampires you've met.
No, this can't be real.
So I guess, unfortunately, I have to pick choices in this game that won't get me killed. Basically, I have to go in the direction that the game seems to want me to go. Free choice is an illusion for vampires, I guess. A sympathetic smile crossed Professor Mickelson's face.
Did your mind try to rationalize it as a bad dream?
Ooh, sounds like fun, Dim. I hope you have a good time.
I'm sorry. You've seen the undead and are targeted by a very nasty vampire group called the House of Skulls. You must make a choice. Live as a donor, become one of us, or die. It is our code. I'm hoping you'll choose to be one of us.
Perhaps we'd better explain what is legend and what is truth to your student. It might make the adjustment easier.
Thanks, Dim.
What's there to say? He sees me daily. He knows that sunlight bothers me, but doesn't make me burst into flames. I don't walk beneath crucifixes. Holy water takes away my strength, and he's never seen me eat.
I was going to say, isn't like a Catholic school kind of a stupid place for a vampire to go? But then I thought, no, that actually is incredibly smart because you would never expect a vampire to be there. Hi, Al Sharfa. How are you doing?
Ugh, think about eating human food just makes me sick. It's awful.
We don't drink blood daily, and we can live well by only taking what we need without killing someone. People forget being bit pretty quickly, Something about our saliva heals both the mind and the flesh. Not every vampire is the same. Some force their donors
Thanks,
to become
Al-Sharfa.
victims. Like humans, there are good vampires and not so good ones.
Feel free to chat as much as you want, though. That's part of the reason why I live stream is to interact with you guys.
Don't worry. Blood doesn't have to come from a person, but they taste better. Some humans volunteer to be our donors. They keep our secret for a price. I drink from a donor volunteer every week. Absolutely no longer than 1 month between bites. Otherwise, it's dangerous to be thirsty. Not biting makes you a little crazy.
Biting people sounded cannibalistic. Mark wondered if he was in over his head, but he was fascinated. Could they really do it? Get away with biting people every so often and not get caught? Almost your bedtime. Also very important. The idea that they didn't feed daily made it seem possible. A dark thought suddenly crossed his mind.
Did a vampire kill that student on campus?
A quick look of admiration crossed Mickelson's face. Oh, I'm so glad that you figured it out. Not, oh yeah, that guy was a jerk. I'm glad that we killed him.
You've always had keen insight. Yes, and you've met the master of her murderer before today.
That goth guy?
Mark pulled out his cell phone.
I need to tell my friends. Kyle and Nate are in trouble.
The professor grabbed his arm.
Think about what you're doing. Do you think they'll believe you if you start ranting about monsters? They'll think you're drunk. I only told you this to protect you.
I appreciate that, Dim. And hey, I'm glad that we're able to start streaming earlier now to accommodate you and other people being able to watch.
You're not supposed to be going around telling everyone. I thought you were ready for this. Was I wrong?
You just told me the impossible exists. What should I be feeling?
Sometimes danger is closer than we expect. If they're hanging around the skulls, then they might already be in over their heads. We don't know.
Must come early and watch. Well, starting at this time, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Fridays.
I want to give you the opportunity to live like us. I'd become a permanent mentor to you. You'll have the chance to study centuries. That's all I'll share. If you decide to join us, then I'll explain the rest as you adjust to your new life.
Yeah, vampires exist. Hey, you feel like becoming a vampire?
I want you to think about this.
You can't just pop that on someone.
And if I say no, that I don't want to become a vampire?
Professor Mickelson, I knew it was dangerous to bring this boy here. Child, you have no choice. If you reject us, you'll be killed by the House of Skulls.
But why, though? Why?
What? I'm not going to coddle the boy. He could also become a blood donor.
Unacceptable. No one is going to feed from Mark. I forbid it.
Good night, everybody.
Careful, Steve. You may be the enforcer, but this is my society that you are speaking to.
Ma'am, I've been thinking, why was Professor Mickelson weak to holy water?
It drains us.
Later, Al-Sharfa.
Unless we have faith, we cannot get near religious objects. It is not painful, just uncomfortable.
We forsake any divine plan and choose not to live a mortal life.
But vampires live forever, right?
As long as we're not murdered or there's no major accident, we live for a very long time.
They're elves. Got it. Hearing the facts from Mrs. Violet calmed Mark, but what she said bothered him. There was a thought and a warning poking in the back of his mind, but he couldn't remember something crucial about vampire lore. A just, new life. It was hard for Mark to believe. Vampires shouldn't exist. Mark had never considered them real before. They were something in stories. Immortality was offered in front of Mark, and it tempted him. He hesitated. If he accepted the professor's offer, he'd be able to witness centuries. Good night, Al-Sharfa. To become a scholar of humanity as ages passed, he'd also live as most men only dreamed, being young forever. But if Mark accepted the professor's offer, he'd also have to give up his normal life, including dates with Jody. Mark figured it'd be impossible to hide vampirism from Jody. He knew that he'd never age like she would. He'd always be in his 20s. He'd have to give her up, and he didn't like that thought. Mark thought about his mother. Cancer sapping away her strength, her skin frail and cracked, her hair thinning and limp, her whispered words of love as she faded. No, he did not want death either. He did not want to fade and disappear in the world, forgotten, forever lost. Well, clearly there's only one right answer, right? Like, if I pick any of the other two, it's probably going to be a game over. So I have to continue.
Yes, I'll do it.
Charlie flashed a fanged smile.
This was not how I wanted to initiate Mark. A good teacher would allow his student time to adjust to the unknown.
You said it, not me. Glad we finally agree on something, Professor.
He raised his eyebrow at her. Pulling off his tweed jacket, Professor Mickelson hung it over his chair. He paused and looked at Mark.
Don't you need more time to think about it? Say clearly what you want, Mr. Delaware.
Mark's eyes snapped to his.
I want to become a vampire.
With a straight face, no doubt.
When do you want to do this? After graduation?
Professor, if I wait to make this decision, I'll change my mind. Please, do it now. I'm ready.
Good man. You'll join the society and work with them until you're ready to be like me. If you ever choose not to be an enforcer, then that is your right. Let's do this. I'll be the one to initiate you.
I wish I could have... You know what? It's not too late, actually. I could just back up. You know what? For the sake of my curiosity, I'm going to back up to
Yes.
this and see what happens if you pick one of the other answers.
No, vampirism isn't worth it. I'm leaving.
Lost in his thoughts, Mark walked around the campus. He never felt so alone, so lost. The man he respected and admired betrayed him. Vampires couldn't be real, and if they were, Mark didn't want any part of their sickness.
Going somewhere?
A man with dark eyeliner approached him. He studied Mark while he spoke.
Are you part of the Society of the Arts?
No, I'm not.
Perfect. I can't wait to see the Enforcer's face. Payback's gonna be great. Humans are just walking meals anyways.
Game over. Oh, I did save at that point, actually, Dim. I don't like this, that you can game over. I don't like it. What's the point of a visual novel if it's gonna force you down a specific path, man? Just knowing that it, like, you have to pick the exact one that you know they want you to pick, and if you don't, it's game over. Like, even if I pick this other one.
No, I'll pass.
It's going to be the exact same ending. Choice doesn't matter. Free will is an
Killing someone.
illusion.
Are you
Who?
perfect?
A VN where you can game over. Like, isn't that just a punch in the face? You want to have a choice in the matter? You don't want to become a vampire after learning about it 2 minutes ago? Well, sucks to be you. Let's become a vampire.
I'll do it.
As should be. He'll be your Tyro.
And now we continue. Professor Mickelson unbuttoned his collar halfway down. He leaned over Mark.
Listen carefully or you'll die. The little bit of blood I gave you last time was nothing like what will happen now. When I drink from you, I will drain you. As I do, you'll feel lost in joy. Then you must drink from me. If you start feeling sad, whatever you do, don't stop. Keep drinking until I tell you no more. If you stop too early, you will die. The transformation takes 2 hours. This is the hardest part.
This is weird, man. Mark nodded. The professor cast a red-rimmed stare at Mark. It almost unnerved the young man. He'd never seen the professor so intense. Is this what a vampire looks like before feeding? Suddenly, hands held Mark against his chair. They swiveled him around, and he found himself looking straight up at the ceiling's white swirled stucco. The society circled Mark with fangs exposed and a hungry look in their eyes. Mark felt the weight of his chair, quickly leaned forward. The professor staggered over him, crawled over his seat, and pushed Mark's face against the chair. Mark tried to pull back, but he pushed harder. With his free hand, he tore Mark's collar and deeply bit into his neck. Pain jerked Mark's body and his blood poured out. Mickelson drank Mark's blood as his shirt stained red. Would he die before he transformed? Was it a mistake to trust them? Doubts circled in his head. Ugh. I do not like this. This is weird. Suddenly, a wave of emotion crashed into Mark. He sucked in air and was sent into spiritual euphoria. A feeling of pure joy washed over him as his body became too heavy to move. He was immobile, but he didn't care. The steady rush of happiness engulfed him, and in a passing thought, Mark wasn't certain if it was because of the draining blood or the vampire's bite. Mark's breathing became shallow, and he shivered from a growing chill. He'd lost too much blood and was moments away from going into shock. The vampire stopped holding him down. Weak, Mark slumped, then found himself coaxed to sit upright. Once he stopped drinking, the euphoria left him. He shivered and felt its loss. He wanted to feel that intense high again. He now understood why humans would be willing donors if a vampire's bite brought this kind of happiness. And he knew that soon he'd be able to give this kind of high to others. He realized he wanted that kind of power if he didn't die from this first. All his thoughts became hazy. He began to fade. The professor studied his young student. Mickelson seemed different. He was not the same professor who wore tweed jackets and kept his hair brushed back. He looked like an escaped animal. The vampire's wild eyes stared at Mark's neck. He took a knife out of his pants pocket and slowly pulled open its blade. Mark shivered when he saw it, afraid Mickelson would change his mind, and instead planned to finish him. Mark wanted to trust the professor, believe in him, but everything was far from anything he had known. Steve Mickelson slid his hand along one of his shoulders and winced as he cut a horizontal gash deep into his skin. The professor placed the knife behind him and leaned forward, his blood dripping down his shirt. Mark flinched. Grabbing the back of his head, Mickelson forced Mark toward the scarlet flowing from his body.
Don't hesitate. Drink!
He was moments from bleeding to death, and he'd have to trust that the Society of the Arts were not playing a cruel, sadistic prank. He pulled his mouth against Mickelson's skin and swallowed. The vampire's blood was disgusting, thick, and tasted rotten. Mark choked, spitting it out. He shook his head.
You're a fool!
Mickelson insulted as he forced Mark's face against his shoulder.
You cannot stop. You must drink. Quickly!
This is making me feel actually a little ill. Mark stopped gagging and swallowed the awful taste. His mind cleared. The earlier fuzzy forgetfulness left him in a rush. His focus came snapping back. Then sadness came. At first, it was a little. Tears ran down Mark's face, and he sobbed as he drank. The feeling grew to sorrow, then depression, then the deepest despair. It drowned him. The amount of joy he felt earlier was nothing compared to this sadness. This depression weighed him down as though a boulder had dragged him far beneath an ocean's waves. He felt as if he'd lost everything, his family, his friends, his future, but the feeling was 10 times worse. He was in agony and he wanted to die. A feeling of separation slammed into him. Mark gasped. It felt as if his spirit was ripped out, as though the center of his being was torn in two. It physically hurt. He wanted it to return, whatever it was that he'd lost. Replacing that fullness was a hollow emptiness. He didn't know where it came from, but he knew he lost something important. He wondered if his sadness was somehow linked to that feeling of separation. Suddenly, he became afraid of the choice he'd made. However, Mark continued to drink Mickelson's blood. Eventually, through the tears, Mark felt stronger and stopped shivering. His sorrow faded, but the emptiness remained. Mickelson exhaled.
Stop now. It will. The first step of the transformation isn't easy. The next part of the transformation isn't pleasant, but you'll feel nothing like the sadness you felt earlier.
Visibly weakened, the professor grinned. Mark grinned too, with the satisfaction that somehow they had made it. Sticky blood covered Mark's mouth and throat. He knew he should have been horrified at himself, but he wasn't. He was emotionally exhausted. The moment he stopped drinking from the professor, the sadness had left. Finally, Mark, freed from despair, was too weak to enjoy the moment. He collapsed. Professor Mickelson caught him before he fell to the floor. Charlie tried to pick up the new vampire, but the enforcer stopped him with a growl.
He's my apprentice. My tyro. I found him. I formed him.
In one jerk, Mickelson picked Mark up. Charlie passed him in the hallway as Mickelson brought Mark into a corner bedroom near the house's entrance. Mark struggled to remain conscious when Charlie helped Mickelson by removing Mark's shoes. The two vampires left Mark lying on the bed, alone in the room, to suffer the rest of the transformation. Through groggy eyes, Mark watched Professor Mickelson sink to his knees as he stepped out of the doorway. Belmonte approached and helped Charlie drag Mickelson away. Mark thought that for a moment he could feel the professor's exhaustion and wondered if the impression was his imagination or simply sympathy. He figured he was overthinking things. Worn out, Mark fell asleep. Harsh sunlight glared in Mark's room. Turning away from the light, Mark squeezed his eyes shut and rubbed his temples. Loud, cooing doves twittered from a neighbor's tree, and he pressed his hands against his ears, trying to block the noise. His stomach churned, and with a rocking motion, he sat up. Rubbing his sore neck, the taste of blood lingered in his mouth. Mark felt cold and thirsty. With a shiver, he groaned. Vampires were real. Professor Mickelson was a vampire, and he, Mark Delaware, had volunteered to become one of them. Bile rose in his throat. Leaning over, he vomited into a trash can near the bedpost. Even after throwing up, he couldn't shake the sickness off. His nausea was worse than a frat party hangover. He knew that it was his fault, and he'd chosen the sickness. He fell back on the bed. The ceiling swirled above him as the room seemed to rock. It was the worst case of vertigo he'd ever had. Charlie heard Mark and rushed into the room with a plastic bucket of water. Charlie wiped Mark's mouth with a wet rag and pushed back the young vampire's hair.
Sorry. Steve, as your new father, should have been here, but he's in bed. He made you drink more blood than you should have last night. We're bringing over donors to help him.
Last night seemed like ages ago. Then, Mark was a normal college student. Now, life was beginning to seem a little surreal. He was actually speaking with a vampire while supposedly changing into one. His ears hurt. Those damn birds wouldn't shut up. A look of confusion crossed Mark's face.
Donors are people who know about us and support us by giving blood.
He tried not to heave. Donors. The word sounded unattached to Mark. So distant. So not human.
I'm shocked you said yes so fast.
Yeah, me too.
If we'd known that Mickelson was going to change you so soon, we would have prepared. What am I talking about? You're both impulsive. You'll be a great vampire, and I hope we'll be friends.
I'm shocked you said yes so fast. Well, it's not like I had a choice.
I know you might hate us right now for forcing you to choose. But once the pain goes away, you'll feel different. You'll see.
Rolling over to his side, he tucked his knees under his stomach and groaned. Charlie brought some medicine to lessen the nausea, but it didn't help. Mark's mouth was sore, and his mouth tasted horrible. Eventually, he pulled himself out of bed, stumbled to the bathroom, and looked at himself in the mirror. He was sickly pale and covered in sweat. His red-rimmed, watery eyes stared back at him. Frowning, Mark stuck the toothbrush into his mouth to get rid of the bad taste. And whoa! Woohoo! Clanging into the sink, a bloody front tooth fell out of his mouth as the taste of rotten blood flowed. Mark spit, then checked out the missing tooth in the mirror. Slowly, he wiggled the opposite one. It quickly popped from his gums. Mark started hollering. This wasn't happening.
It's okay. You're all right.
No, he wasn't okay. He'd lost teeth. He wondered if he'd lose his hair next.
It happens to all of us. Your fangs are descending.
Mark paused at the word fangs. Slowly, he swished water and spit again. He didn't want to be the world's first toothless vampire. With hesitation, Mark looked into the mirror. New, little sharp canines peeked out where he'd lost his teeth. As he watched, they slowly descended into place. Mark tugged at them just to see if they were real. He nicked his finger. Gasping in pain, he popped the bloody finger into his mouth.
When this is over, Steve suggested I should teach you how to blend in a crowd. I think it'll be fun. There's a lot of places you and I can go. I look young, but I have more experience than the others. Steve will be a teacher for the really important things.
Wait, you're not the youngest? You look young. Well, Mrs. Violet has to be the oldest.
Oh, I'm glad she didn't hear you say that. No, Violet transformed in the 1950s. Don't be fooled. Even though she looks the oldest, she's actually our youngest member besides you. She knew us since the 1920s, and we all appreciated her eye to catch fake art. She surpassed even President Belmonte in that gift. He is her progenitor, although it took him decades to convince her to be one of us.
Mark couldn't believe Mrs. Violet was the youngest society member. Her personality seemed so uptight compared to the others. He wondered if they'd learned to adjust to the times and she couldn't. Or maybe she wouldn't.
I'm the second oldest. Belmonte transformed me. Our human families die or forget us. It's for the best new vampires cut ties. When you don't age, when the younger generations don't believe that you're related, it's painful when family rejects you. We're the president's family now.
Mark remembered that Charlie mentioned his father was a Dahomey prince. He wondered if Charlie was pushed out of his birthright because his family had forgotten him. It was a sad thought. Other society vampires came in from time to time, but it was mostly Charlie who cared for Mark. Eventually, an exhausted Mickelson took over caring for him and gave Mark an IV of something red. Otherwise, he wasn't allowed to eat. The pattern of heaving, medicine, and drowsiness continued for 3 days. He heard Mickelson's worried voice whisper that it was taking Mark longer than normal to adjust. Mark couldn't wait to feel better, and he wondered if he ever would. His mind was refreshed. Mark's sense of smell was stronger, so was his hearing. Breathing in again, he concentrated on rose perfume mingled with sweat. He heard breathing and a sharp gasp. Mesmerized by the scent and the sound, he walked down the creaky hallway and neared a room at the end of the hall. Somewhere in that room was a familiar presence, as though Mark was emotionally linked with whomever was past the open door. Surprise jolted through him. Mark felt someone else's pleasure, as on the other side of that doorway, someone satiated his thirst. It made Mark think about his own dry throat. He drank water, but he was still thirsty. He pushed open the door. Mickelson straddled on his seat. A brunette woman sat in between his lap. She smiled as Mickelson sucked her throat. Mickelson squeezed her tighter as she brushed back her hair from her neck. Mark somehow knew that he enjoyed biting her. Suddenly his fierce eyes locked onto Mark's. Mark wondered if Professor Mickelson could also sense him. Mickelson released the woman, and the scent of blood slammed into Mark. Mickelson hollered.
Get him away from here!
Mark acted on instinct. He sprang at her, pushing past the society. The vampires caught Mark in midair, slamming him against the wooden floor as they dragged him out of the room. Hello! How do I pronounce that? Hawakalale? I'm going to call you Hawa. How about that? Hawak? I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. He was strong. Stronger and faster than he'd ever felt before, and he was giving the society a fight. Slapping the planks, Mark tried to keep them from pulling, but he was no match for 3 vampires.
Bring him downstairs. We'll feed him there.
They restrained his arms and dragged him to the living room. Mark kicked and screamed, furious that they wouldn't let him go. He wanted to know why they wouldn't share. The society whispered to each other, but Mark couldn't focus on them. He hungrily watched Mickelson's donor as he escorted her away. The only thing Mark focused on was her neck, and the only thing he wanted to do was bite it.
Bloodlust. child. You'll get over it once you...
My dear, you know he can't hear you.
Professor Mickelson entered the room and stared at his new vampire apprentice.
I want blood now!
An animal-like fury ripped from Mark. He seemed ready to attack anyone, including the vampire in front of him. Mickelson tugged Mark's scalp and forced him to look up. Mickelson could feel his fear. Mark could feel his fear. Mickelson was afraid.
Mark, listen. Miss Laura, my donor, could lose her life if you bite her like this. Here, drink this instead. When you drink, only take 10 gulps, no more. Listen to your body. You'll quickly feel satisfied.
He poured him a glass of red liquid. He ripped the cup from Mickelson's hands and began to take big gulps, emptying the glass. There's something about this VN that makes everyone's eyes do this every once in a while. Suddenly, Mark's eyes became clear.
I felt her pleasure when you bit her. Why?
As long as we're nearby, a tyro and his progenitor are always emotionally linked. We won't be able to hear each other's thoughts, so don't worry, I won't listen in. My donor felt joy when I bit her. What we sense is their spirit. When we connect with their blood, we're able to feel their emotions.
Gross. Now that he wasn't going crazy by the scent of blood, he remembered the serious question he wanted to ask while he transformed into a vampire. Mark wanted an explanation for the emptiness, the hollow rift he felt inside.
Is it true that vampires lose their souls?
Mickelson huffed.
I thought you didn't care about such things.
Child, we aren't the original vampires. We do not know that answer. All of us here transformed from the blood of another. I don't worry about it. You shouldn't either.
If it is true, then if we die, we'll all go to hell, I suppose.
Well, that's one way to think about it. Well, better save here. Again.
Did I make a mistake?
Her phrase didn't give Mark much comfort. He suddenly realized his mistake. This should have been the first thing he'd asked. Mark remembered his grandfather telling him that sometimes evil goes by half-truths. If that was the case, he felt hoodwinked. But the professor wasn't a liar. Even if vampires were evil, Mark didn't think this group was evil. They didn't give this impression, although he wasn't sure. Who murdered those college women? From his new experience with bloodlust, Mark realized how easily he could become a killer. Now he understood why they needed an enforcer. The thought was disturbing. He reflected on his sadness, which flooded him when he drank Mickelson's blood. He knew it came from deep inside him, a sorrow that ripped him into two and left him incomplete. Now only hollowness remained inside. Before that moment, he was just an agnostic who wasn't sure if anyone had a soul. Now he started to believe. Had he felt the soul's existence? Does a vampire become such a monster that he no longer cares if he may have lost his soul? Mark shivered and wondered if he lost anything else important with it. What other traits of his humanity fled, besides the obvious physical ones? The night was crisp when all the society walked outside to Mrs. Violet's backyard. Mark's vampire eyes saw the full moon as a glowing pearl. Its light looked stronger than anything in his human memories. Thousands of stars glistened the clear Colorado night. Mickelson pulled a small, red-wrapped package from his coat pocket and gave it to his new apprentice.
Open it, Tyro.
What does tyro mean, anyways?
A beginner. It's what we call our apprentices.
Battle on.
This is a ring from the Society of the Arts. Read the inside.
The inscription read, "Honor the code. There our secret hides."
Technically, that's the Society's motto. It means to always pretend to be human. Our lives depend on it. This rule has kept the Society safe for hundreds of years.
Thank you.
No thanks are necessary. The Enforcer and I spoke while you were transforming. Since you'll be his trainee, you're not yet an Enforcer. Steve didn't want you to belong to a house, but after we discussed it, we think it's best for new Tyros to join the vampire family. However, this may give us some problems. Other groups will see Mickelson's choice as favoritism, but don't worry about that too much.
Oh, it 100% is favoritism.
Go ahead. It'd be our honor to wear our crest.
Mark slid the ring on his finger. It fit perfectly. Ah, and there it is in the art. He's wearing it now.
Welcome to the Society of the Arts. Play your part well.
Cheers, clapping, and hugs surrounded Mark. Raising the Society of the Arts ring, Mark studied it in the clear moonlight and looked forwards to a very interesting life.
You need to learn how to be a proper vampire. I recommend Charlie teaching you, since he has a knack for hunting. But I can teach you as well. Who would you prefer to instruct you?
Of course, we're supposed to say Professor Mickelson. I'm sure Charlie's a perfectly fine option. What happens if we pick the other two? Well, I'm curious.
Shouldn't I be concerned about my soul? Did I make a mistake?
And then he dies.
A little late to ask that, don't you think? I want you to really try and enjoy the experience of becoming a vampire before you ask questions like that. Perhaps joining Charlie is for the best.
Ready to learn to feed? Charlie will teach you. Casse bon, it's been a while since I painted the town red.
Let me check my status. I don't know what any of these are, and I don't think we've met Johnny and Ricky yet, whoever they are. Anyway. Hopefully he wasn't too literal. Charlie smiled, his fangs peeked behind his top lip. Mickelson rubbed his forehead with obvious annoyance.
Young people don't say that anymore. Maybe I should teach him.
We're going to a 1920s themed fraternity party. Mickelson, you'd stick out like a sore thumb there. No one wants to see their teacher when they get drunk. The crowds will be perfect for Mark's lesson. Get ready.
Mark was nervous. His first human blood was from Professor Mickelson's donor. He had woken as a new vampire, and bloodlust clouded his judgment. Since he had fed earlier, he should be able to control himself. But would he be able to feed from someone in public? It was risky. He could kill that person accidentally. What if he needed more time to adjust and the professor was wrong about him? Building up courage, Mark thought of where Charlie would take him. It was a place where people wouldn't be as cautious. Mark steadied himself. He could do this. Like a pro racer, Charlie's Navy sports car whizzed past freeway traffic. Mark held on tight to the handles of the car's roof as it exited 20 miles an hour above the speed limit. The car jumped a curve and a semi-truck honked its horn. After whipping down a neighborhood street, Charlie suddenly turned the car 90 degrees. Charlie squeezed in between two clunkers parked behind the Sigma house. He stomped on the brakes and Mark lurched forward as Charlie left only inches before the car in front of him. Mark staggered out of the car and held his head between his knees. Nausea bubbled up and he thought he was about to hurl. He'd spent the last 3 days in a sick room and didn't want to return there. Mark glared at Charlie, who shrugged. Charlie was a health hazard. Charlie pocketed his keys in his inner vest pocket before he bounded up the concrete steps to the Sigma Chi Gamma frat house. 2 quick knocks on the door. Charlie grinned as a tall, ebony frat brother peeked behind a small crack in the doorway.
Password.
Moonshine.
Come on in, Charlie.
What happened here? The frat brother gave a bright smile and waved both vampires in with a pat on Charlie's back. Mark and Charlie walked past a game of beer pong and some freshmen dancing to techno music, laced with songs by 1930s crooners. Mark held his breath. Students reeked of cheap beer, and Mark could smell it off of them 10 paces away. The frat brother danced over to where they stood.
Mark, when did you meet Charlie? Great outfit, bro.
Mark looked down at Charlie's dress shoes. Somebody would step on his shiny shoes, splash them with beer, or worse. Cringing, he thought he'd hate to be the one who ruined a vampire's night.
I met him a few days ago.
He watched the guy to make sure he wasn't giving any weird looks. The engineering student seemed too plastered to notice any change in Mark. Hopefully no one would notice.
He is the coolest grad student ever. This guy gets any girl he wants. He can't get away from them. It's his accent. Hey, where are you from again?
I lived a long time in Louisiana.
Right. Well, it's great running into you guys. I'll see you around the party.
I thought you couldn't go outside much.
I still go with a young gator.
Charlie opened a cabinet, reached deeply inside, and helped himself to some red wine.
What? Can I enjoy some wine? I keep a stash of it here.
Suddenly, some cute college girls caught Charlie's eye. Yeah. He threw his arm around Mark's shoulders and continued in a softer voice.
Ah, there we go. When we meet Ladane, flirt with them. After they're comfortable, lead one to a quieter place. Kiss your mark when you're ready. It hides what we do.
But won't she remember being bitten? Or worse, that you're a vamp?
Careful. Don't use that word in public. You never know when a hunter's around.
Reminds me of this one movie, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
You gotta be joking. Seriously?
No one wants to meet a hunter. They've no pity. So about the girl. No, she won't remember. If you're scared, it might take her longer to forget. The bites heal quickly. She'll only see 2 bruises and probably think they're love bites. Donors love being bit.
He gave a dark chuckle, and Mark gulped.
But I was able to remember it.
You can't forget transforming. That's life-changing. Donors are another story. The society approves them, so our relationship is less secretive. Bite a target too often and they remember. That's how donors are made.
Do we drink from one another? Has anyone done that before?
Only form a blood bond with your progenitor. A piece of the other one's feelings always remains with you. Only a psycho wants to do that. You taste horrible, and then there's the sorrow that first time. You remember? The price isn't worth it. But there's someone who does bite others.
Mark's eyes widened. Who'd want to experience that twice? Charlie's face was grim as he answered the unspoken question.
Your professor. Forgive me. Yours, Tyro. That's between you two. Now, let's find some ladies.
You're just gonna leave it at that? Charlie strutted into the crowd. Concerns crossed his mind. Did Mickelson plan to drink from him again? What kind of person would purposefully do that? Was it something that was a part of an enforcer's job, to be able to find his mark? Or was it something darker? Drink their own kind? Mark couldn't figure it out. Vampires tasted awful, but he would do it if it meant protecting others. He tried to change his thoughts. At a party, no one approaches the gloomy guy. The fraternity brothers set up a block of ice and took turns pressing their mouths against the cold block, sucking down shots poured from the top. There were 3 kegs of beer and plenty of vodka. Yeah, right, Tim? Mood. This was what a fraternity party was about. Plenty of booze, women, and crazy fun. Wooden plank floors wobbled with every step their partiers took, but they didn't mind. They jumped and screamed, not caring if the floor broke. Mark joined them and was lost in the music and the dancing. A scent of gardenias wafted to him. Mark turned to a Gamma Beta Gamma sorority girl with bright red hair, wearing a flapper headband and gold flapper dress. The thirst pulled at him. Closing his eyes, Mark imagined his teeth biting into flesh. He became thirsty. He felt guilty for a moment. He told himself it was a raw need, not desire. He took advantage of the moment and started to dance with her. He whispered in her ear, flirted, and tried to steal a kiss. She giggled and pushed him away. Maybe this woman was just a good girl. Too bad. Before he could tease her, her roommate called her away. Charlie returned with his arms wrapped around 2 girls. Mark couldn't help staring at the gorgeous ladies. Mark wasn't as lucky. Charlie coaxed one of the women with him towards Mark.
Rachel, this is my good friend Marco I was telling you about.
Hi. I hear you're graduating soon with 2 majors. Wow, you must be pretty smart. Can you speak in French to me? I want to learn a few new words.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Naturellement.
Mark answered with a sly smirk. She giggled, and Charlie unwrapped his arm from her. Things were looking up.
Why don't you and Rachel talk for a bit? I'm going for a drink. You both should too. Come along, Christine.
Did he just wink at them? He led the blonde toward the edge of the Sigma's backyard. Rachel took the opportunity and whispered in Mark's ear. Mark guided her to a dark corner of the room while he teased and laughed. Well, whoop, right there. We know that we're supposed to pick he drinks her blood. So naturally,
So, do you want to go to a concert? Grapes and Wrath are playing tonight. They rock.
Heck yeah.
okay, I'm thinking that the fact that this is just so sudden means that, yeah, he's about to die. Music spilled from a plain-looking brick building with black trim. Mark, Kyle, and Nate crossed the street. A strong stench of body odor and staleness caused Mark to gag and cover his mouth. A homeless man leaned against an alley wall. He was the same one who Mark saw before loitering around Dive's pub. His tattered case of vampire weapons was open in that hand. He seemed to be asleep, but when they approached, he slowly cracked his eyes open and watched them with an almost unnatural stillness. Mark tried not to stare or act strange. He wasn't sure what the man was thinking and doubted if he was sane. The homeless man closed his eyes at rest again. Kyle and Nate didn't glance his way and passed the man as though he didn't exist. Mark supposed that it was true. Most people wouldn't notice a poor man who didn't have a firm hold on reality. The loud music hit Mark's sensitive ears. Mark held his hands over his ears as he looked around the club. No wonder his doormates disappeared many nights during the last semester. The whole place fit them. The headlining band was Grapes and Wrath, Nate's favorite. Deep-toned German and English lyrics flooded the nightclub. Fangirls wearing fishnet tights lined the front row, screamed names, and begged for the band to touch their outstretched hands. The crowd rocked their heads with the band raising first and pinky fingers up, saluting the music. The club moved like a beating heart, pulsating to the rhythm. A throbbing pain filled his gums as his vampire teeth pushed through. It was overwhelming in the club. Dangerous. Unsure if he could control himself, Mark began to sway as he pushed past a couple of pretty girls with dark eye makeup and mesh shirts. The whole crowd, the immersing concert, every moment of it engulfed him. The bass from the speakers pounded through his body. Hugging himself, he felt as though he would pass out from the overwhelming senses. Deep within him, he called for help. Nate saw Mark struggling. Waving Kyle over, the two guided Mark to the back of the club. Stunned, Mark was thankful for the rescue. The twins watched Mark as his fangs receded to a normal length, but didn't say a word. The twins led Mark to a black painted door with a silver skull painted in its center. A Moonlight Club sign next to the door warned, off limits, staff only.
Hey, where are we going?
So is he going to die or not?
There's someone you should meet.
Mark's skin broke into goosebumps as they opened the door and walked into complete blackness. The basement had been painted entirely ebony. Mark's eyes widened. People actually lived in this gloomy place? All furniture, the floor, the walls were black. The setup reminded Mark of how theaters are designed to black out once the spotlights dimmed. One small light shone in the room. If it went out, Mark doubted that even with his vampire sight, he'd be able to see. I guess he's not going to die. In the deep shadows, a goth male squinted his black-lined eyes at him. His expression casted darker shadows on his face. His sharp eyes never left Mark as he and the twins descended the staircase. A woman in her early 20s stood next to the goth. She tugged at a gothic Lolita skirt and black high-collared shirt. She pursed her lips.
They came.
Bass from the upstairs rock club made a constant rhythm above as they sat still in the basement. Damien closed his eyes and listened. He sneered at their guest once he opened his eyes. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Dem. Oh, but I did see your Imgur album that you sent me last time. It's a very impressive collection.
You should have told me your friend is a vampire.
Mark startled.
Did you think I wouldn't know? No heartbeat.
He tapped his palm against his chest.
Damien, Genshu, this is Mark Delaware.
Mark recognized them as the same creepy group from the St. George Amphitheater. Why were they here? The guy staring him down was the vampire the professor warned him about, and Mark had walked right into their den. How long had his friends been hanging out with them? Stunned, Mark turned to the twins, but they didn't seem surprised with the goth's reaction. Damien scratched the number 2000 tattooed on the calf beneath his coal-colored pants. Mark felt that something was off with this vampire. Motioning to the twins, the guy with the eyeliner frowned.
Come and sit beside me, you two. Nate, I asked you to bring me an extra snack tonight. Instead, you bring another mouth to feed.
The twins shrugged and acted unsurprised at the news that he was a vampire. How long had they known? Why didn't they say anything sooner? If they knew this is a group of vampires, why would they hang out with them? Mark swallowed. Only human blood donors would. Is this why they were always late returning to the dorms that semester? Mark thought about the bruises he'd seen on the twins. I'm confused. So, we were given a choice, and we chose what I thought was the wrong one, but the game's not over. Did we choose the right choice? I don't know. This game confuses me. This guy obviously had no respect for his friends. The tattooed vampire sat down and motioned for Mark to come closer, but Mark remained standing where he was.
So which group changed you? Don't be nervous. We'd find out anyways.
Mark gulped. His throat felt dry, scratchy. Damien looked at Mark's finger, and a look of disgust crossed his face. Well, game's not over. With that, I can do this, though. Because I accidentally made 2 save files, I can go back and see what happens. At this point. And he does drink her blood. I'm just very interested, that's all. He wanted to prove that Charlie that he was ready, that he could feed as any vampire. Mark kissed her sweetly. She flinched away. Damn!
Your mouth feels like ice. Have you been drinking ice shots?
He nodded. Sweeping her into his arms, Mark kissed her harder. She didn't seem to mind. It was just kissing. She kissed back and slid her tongue in Mark's mouth, pulling him towards her. Mark slightly pulled away and started to kiss the corner of her mouth, then down her neck. She giggled as his kisses went down to her shoulders. She kept his body against hers. The DJ's music was loud. It was dark and they were hidden. Mark drew in a shaky breath of the scent of her skin. He listened to her wet heartbeat thrum with quick, tight beats. He took a chance. Ugh, that sound. His teeth sank into her soft skin. She gasped, and he felt her chest rise beneath him. Her heartbeat pounded faster, an amazing feeling. He felt her joy, her excitement, the rush of power over another was exhilarating. With a lazy smile, Rachel relaxed in his arms. Mark counted the seconds as he sucked her neck. He felt energized, stopped drinking, and pulled away. He wasn't sure if it was because he just drank her blood, or if it was the rush from the kiss.
You're a biter, just like Charlie.
She gasped and covered her mouth.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
What? I don't care who you've kissed before, as long as I can kiss you again.
So there wasn't a wrong choice. Yeah, what you're saying. This time Mark kissed gently for fun. A tangy, metallic flavor sank into his mouth. He quickly pulled away. If they kept kissing, she'd also taste her blood. He looked into her eyes to see if she'd notice. Nothing in her expression gave away his mistake. From the opposite corner of the room, someone took large, high-heeled step towards them. Oh, good lord!
Doing?
Well, I don't care if he actually dies or not. He is dead. He is so dead. He is dead. Oh, man. Pour one out for Mark, who is about to die. We're about to witness a murder.
Jody? I thought you were going home spring break.
I think I'll go. Nice knowing you.
Yeah, he's dead.
I don't need to tell you where I am all of the time. Good thing I didn't.
I'm sorry, Jody.
If you didn't plan to have me as your girlfriend, you should have never led me on. Jerk!
The splash of cold beer hit Mark's face as Jody stomped away. Mark's heart clenched.
Even I know better than to feed in front of my woman. It would have never worked, friend. You're a vampire. She isn't. Let's go.
So, do you want to go to a concert? Grapes and Wrath are playing tonight. They rock.
Okay. I think all that happened is that changed our relationship with Jody. I'd rather go back to the one that we were at where it isn't. Yeah, I'm going back to this original one. Oh, man. I might never go back to that save file. We'll just all accept that Mark died. He's a vampire and somehow found a way to still get himself killed. Oh, man, what do I do here?
The Society of the Arts found you first. Now you're with them. My name's Damien. We've no leaders here in the House of Skulls, but I speak for what's left of us.
Even if he said that, he obviously acted like their leader. The professor had known these vampires were watching Mark while he was still human. So yeah, that's what that choice was. The choice that we made affected our relationship with Jody. Since she killed us, I mean, clearly that affected it pretty negatively. But by skipping that, it either affects it positively or not at all. And I think I prefer this path anyway, so. Is that why Mikkelsen offered immortality? Mark hoped that he honestly wanted him to be his Tyro, and not because he didn't want this group to have a new toy. Mark cautiously watched the couple staring at him. He didn't like learning there was a group of stalker vampires close to home.
Skulls are better. We're free. But joining the Society of the Arts, you couldn't have joined a more stiff organization. Every vampire in the Rockies knows about the Society. They rarely speak to other vampires. Except for the culture of love. Those hippie vampires get along with everybody.
Hippies suck ass in every galaxy. Damien frowned. His attention turned to the twins who sat next to him. He spoke quietly to Nate.
It's been a while and I'm very thirsty. Mind if I take a bite?
Nate stiffened, then slowly nodded. I do not like that sound. That's a bad sound. Ugh. Damien threw Nate against the back of the couch and bit his neck. Holding down his shoulders, the vampires drank voraciously, some blood spilling down the vinyl furniture. Nate gasped with pain. It's pain? That's interesting. Why is it pain? It shouldn't it be nice? Suddenly stopping, Damien pulled himself away and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Nate's grimace turned into a smile, a donor's usual reaction from having his blood sucked. Well, there you go, Den. The vampire was close to killing him, but Mark's doormate seemed unaware. He was high. The other member of the House of Skulls ignored him. Chenju was drinking from Kyle, but she was more gentle with her actions. But even to Mark, it was clear she was drinking too much, without a thought for her donor. The Society of the Arts' relationship of trust with their donors promised them safety, and that they'd never be abused or shared outside of the society like cattle. The House of Skulls was brutal, and it didn't take an experienced vampire to figure that out. Their whole feeding seemed wrong. It was sick. Mark was horrified. Licking off some blood, Damien extended Nate's arm towards Mark.
Take some.
Damien glared at Mark.
Well, if you're not hungry, I won't force you.
Okay.
You're still pretty new. I'm surprised you came here. No one in the society does.
Bunch of stuck-up snobs probably don't like free blood. Probably don't want to drink from the peasants and all that.
He pointed to a few college-aged teens slumped on the back couches. They were asleep, bruised bites marred their necks. One looked a little younger than the others. Her breathing was shallow and she looked like her makeup was days old. She stood up with shaky legs and tottered up the stairs.
Don't look so shocked. Our guests come and go as they like, sweetie. It's their choice if they want to party with us. But back to you being a vamp. We are what we are, whether we were given a choice or not. So, did the society give you a choice?
No, not really. She suddenly gave a vulnerable look to Mark. He couldn't figure out why she looked wistful, longing even. Well, we saw in the prologue she didn't have a choice, and neither did Damien, but especially more her, yeah.
I wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. Damien sucked in a breath.
I didn't have much time to decide. A vampire attacked me, and I was dying.
An attack, huh? Like I said, hanging out with us is better. You should. We're short members in the House of Skulls and could use someone new.
Do you think we made a mistake becoming vampires?
Damien looked shocked and glanced at Shinju.
Never. I'd never want to go back and become a stupid human either. Listen, we're the apex predator. In the survival of the fittest, no one wants to be the prey. Think about joining us. All the best bands play here. Music is good.
Not even Charlie visits?
That jazz guy? Nope. Is he your progenitor?
Him? No. Professor Mickelson is.
Why open your mouth, Mark? Why would you do that? Slamming a nearby table with his palm, fury crossed Damien's face. But he quickly tampered it down. His voice sounded odd.
The enforcer of the damn code. Listen to me. The professor is dangerous. The killer of vampire kind. He doesn't just enforce the code, he breaks it. No vampire drinks from another, but I heard he does. He drained another like us before. Sucked him dry. Leave him before he decides to make a meal out of you.
I'm not sure.
Damien's eyes had a wild look.
It's not a rumor the culture of love made up after a few puffs of reefer. It's true. You'd better stay away from him. He's dangerous. Forced to link and kill his creator. He crosses lines none of us does.
He's right. Damien and I are close, but we'd never drink each other's blood. It might sound kinky, but it connects you to another. Too much of it and you don't know the difference between what you're doing and what he's doing.
What kind of vamp would drink from another? You tell me.
I don't know. The rules of this game are made up as they go, so how am I supposed to know? Mark knew the answer. Only the desperate or the curious. Like someone who'd want to know histories and everyone else's secrets. If his progenitor was old, Mark could see the professor crossing that line.
Let's go. The headliner's about to start.
What about the girls?
The night will wear off by morning.
If they aren't out of here by tomorrow morning, dump them by the bus stop, Kyle. They'll find their way home.
A foreign accent spoke beside them.
Damien, I see you have our title.
Damien stiffened, then stood slowly up and glared at the trespasser.
He's free to leave. We all are in the skulls. If he wants to stay, he's welcome to.
You'd better go home, Tylo. Your progenitor is looking for you.
Damien sneered.
Yeah, I understand. I want to make your enforcer angry. Remember what I said, Mark.
I'm taking the twins back with me.
With that, Mark quickly left with his friends. As Mark walked on campus, he noticed a man with disheveled hair standing there. It was Professor Mickelson. Standing on the pebble walkway with crossed arms, his deep purple eyes were from lack of sleep. When the professor saw Mark, his eyes widened to a wild stare.
Uh-oh. Looks like you're in trouble.
I guess we'll see you around.
Clamping his sweaty palms into a fist, Mark kept his head low as he walked over the gravel. He stopped in front of Mickelson, but didn't look at his face, afraid to see what was there. Instead, Mark felt waves of righteous anger through the progenitor Tyro Link. The rolling tempest was kept back by whatever little patience lingered within the older vampire. Stepping with strong strides, the professor looked as though he could push his apprentice off a building. He talked with chipped syllables as he led Mark towards into the center of campus. Exhaling, he spoke in a gruff voice.
How could you? How could you be so stupid? I thought I chose a smart Tyro, not a fool.
The anger behind his words pressed down around them.
I left you a message on your phone.
Shit, his excuse sounded lame even to him.
And then you never answered your phone. That's really being a genius.
Grabbing Mark's shoulders, he squeezed until they hurt.
You never checked in with me. Not even once to say you were okay. You're a brand new vampire. It's not safe for anyone to be traveling with you, especially humans. Your RA opened your room for me when I couldn't contact you. What did he find? Your cell phone. I thought that you'd regretted your choice and went wandering God knows where.
I was okay. I was with the twins and...
He sniffed Mark's shoulder and sneered.
Vampires. What's this? Human blood. Please tell me you didn't hunt with other vampires.
Yeah, for real, Dim. He stilled, and concern fled from their link. Something cold and calculating replaced it.
Hunt? You mean chase down humans?
The professor reached into his tweed jacket pocket and held something against his chest. A wooden stake peeked from the material flap of his jacket. His cold eyes studied Mark as he spoke in a hollow tone.
Whose blood do I smell?
It was a girl from Charlie's lesson. Don't worry, I didn't hurt her.
What aren't you telling me? Why can't you trust me? I chose you to be my successor for a reason. Did I make a mistake?
I like either of these bottom. I mean, he's going to kill us if we pick one of them, so...
Didn't you? I may have lost my soul thanks to you.
Belmonte told me where he found you, at that damn House of Skulls. Don't ever do that again. Do you understand?
I mean, they're a little different, but I don't think...
No, you didn't think.
He returned the wooden object back into his jacket. Speaking to himself, he said,
He's only a week old, and my Tyro met the House of Skulls. Why them? Why not meet the Grim Reaper? Do you know what those vampires could have done to you? They could have drained you dry, killed you for fun.
Mark's jaw dropped. There was no way that vampires could do that to each other. Was there? He remembered what Damien told him. His temper rose.
Just like you drank from another vampire? Were you just thinking of killing me now?
That's totally different. Sometimes, as Enforcer, there are things I hate to do each and every damn time.
You didn't answer my question. What about your progenitor?
Something flashed across Mickelson's face before he stilled his expression.
As far as my progenitor goes, that's another story. I did drink from my creator. I did what my father asked me to do. I obeyed him, like you're supposed to obey me. If I ever hear that you joined the Skulls on a hunt, yes, I will kill you without a second thought. Are you surprised?
At this point, nothing surprises me.
The Skulls are known to break the code and hunt humans. Have you forgotten? I ended the one who tried to murder you. He was Damien's friend. Damien's a devious leader and will try to use you to get revenge on me. Never forget it.
Sharp fangs protruded from Professor Mickelson's sneer. Mickelson was dangerous. Mark understood why he was chosen to be the enforcer. But who was telling the truth? Was Damien right? Or was his mentor? You know, this is probably counterintuitive, but at this point I kind of lean more towards Damien than Mickelson. I feel like Mickelson has some kind of an ulterior motive. And there's something he's just not sharing. Especially just how far along we've come in such a short amount of time. I really feel like there's something that is being left out at this point.
It was a mistake to let you out of my sight before you were at least a year old. Starting from today, you'll be barred from the society.
No!
Life alone as a vampire would be torture. Some people manage better by themselves, but Mark never figured himself as that kind of person. Loneliness. How long could someone last by themselves without anyone who'd understand? The professor pulled open the door to the teaching theater.
You'll be banned from the society meetings until they meet again at Mrs. Violet's house. That'll be 4 months. Until then, you'll train each weekend with me. You're not to leave the city.
And also, Mickelson's kind of overbearing. He gave Mark a cruel smile, and Mark sulked.
What's the problem? You're a vampire. 4 months should be nothing to you. You've got eternity. Just focus on graduating.
Relief flooded Mark. He wouldn't be isolated forever. 4 months should be easy. A knock came at Mark's door as the twins peeked their heads inside his room. They were paler than usual, and they had many sets of double bruises on their necks and arms. Standing up, Mark asked them what the hell happened.
Damien was a little angry today. He takes it out when he drinks.
How can you say that so casually?
Yeah, on us.
Why was he so upset?
You. He ran into Professor Mickelson. Your professor told Damien off and that we're supposed to leave you alone. As if we'd listen to him. You need to break his rules. The Skulls will hang out with whoever they want. Why don't you come and join them? And we could always stay friends.
Do you think the Society of the Arts will let you keep hanging with us?
You chose to be used by the House of Skulls.
We're loyal donors. Someday they promise to make us into one of them. We're going to be vampires too.
You really think he'll make you into a vampire?
Why wouldn't he?
You're donor, that's why. I don't think that they can keep biting random club girls. Somebody will find out. You are his steady blood supply.
But for how long? How long do you think you can handle being bit? Being food? What will they do the day you say no?
So now you're a vampire, you think you're better than us. That you know more than us.
Just don't. Some of us aren't as lucky as you.
For a split second, something like envy crossed their faces.
Lucky? I'm this way because I was attacked. I didn't have much time to make my choice. I wish I wasn't a vampire. Life as a vampire isn't perfect. There's sacrifices.
Like what?
Jody and I broke up.
Did you really?
Boo-hoo. I thought you were going to say something big.
I thought you were into her. Did Professor Mickelson make you two break up?
Mark didn't like how they asked that, like somehow he was the professor's dog.
I can't be with her unless she's a donor. The code says that only human donors may know what we are. And before you even suggest it, I won't bring her into this world. You may not understand it, but it's for the best.
This happened off screen.
No, I think I get it. You like her a lot.
Mark exhaled and calmed himself.
This path, this life, In the end, I chose this. Officially, I'll be introduced to all the vampires in Colorado this week. I'm sticking with this society. I don't really trust Damien.
Well, I thought he was in isolation for 4 months. What gives?
Whatever.
The next morning, Mark thought to wait for the twins to walk to class together, but he changed his mind. Pissed off with them, he left the dorm early. I'm just so completely confused on what I think about this game, frankly. That'll bring the stream to an end. Okay, Twice Reborn, a vampire visual novel. I really don't know what I think about this. If you guys are into this kind of thing, all more power to you. It is now out on consoles, so go and pick it up if you want. Thanks Dim, Hawa, Al-Sharfa, and the Lurkers for all being here. I'll be back on Sunday to continue my playthrough of Seabed, a Yuri visual novel, so be on the lookout for that. On behalf of East Asia Soft, I have been Skull. Have yourselves a great day and a great weekend, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.